We are just a few days away from game day for Saluki women's basketball, starting off with a bang, going down to Auburn, and we've got the head coach Kelly Bond White joining us now. Coach, thanks so much for the time. I know it's a busy time, but it's got to be so exciting knowing all the work that went into this offseason and building this roster.
Yeah, it's here. It's here. It's a really, really exciting time. You just talked to your young ladies about, sowing seeds, and at the right time, those will start to harvest. And but regardless, you got to keep tending to those seeds. And so that's what we've been talking about around here. But of course, they're excited. They got a little bit of getting away from each other by competing in a couple of our scrimmages where we got to see, what they would do in live action. But I think they're itching and they're ready. They're ready to go. I don't know how much I'm ready, uh, but that's the beauty of youth is that they're raring to go.
You know, practice is one thing, and I'm sure practices are competitive. They always are. But scrimmages are a different story because it's those first few times going up against somebody else. What did you guys glean from those two scrimmage games?
The only a couple of things from there was tremendous growth from the first scrimmage to the second, and we made sure the second was an opponent that was an NCAA caliber opponent. They had veterans that had been in a system that we wanted to make the system as close to different styles. The first team was really geared more towards our first game than the second team was geared more towards the Missouri Valley Conference, so we could get both looks out of it. But what we've learned is we've seen growth. We've seen our kids have a better understanding of the philosophies that we've been trying to put in, and them just having the chance to go out there and try. They do it every day in practice against our guys, but you have that excuse of, well, the guys are bigger, stronger, faster than us. How can we but now we're competing with those guys. And then when you get into a scrimmage situation, it's like, oh, okay. Well, now we can actually see why you guys have been telling us that. And so still a lot of cleanup that has to take place before we head down the road. But we know, our opening game, as excited as we are for it and having an opportunity to compete against an NCAA team, we know that that'll prepare us even for the games remaining on our schedule.
And you mentioned veterans, playing veterans. With this roster, you lost a lot of veterans last year. Just give me an
We
idea
did.
of how much work went into building this roster. I mean, building any collegiate roster in 2024 is a challenge, but just how much did it take to get this group together in the first place?
Man, let me tell you something. I got this headband on. I probably sacrificed my edges with worry. It used to be gray hairs, but now those edges are leaving, a little bit. It's a new world. It's a new world, Larry, that you have to be able to adjust and you have to be able to pivot, whether you're trying to figure out, scholarship monies, whether you're trying to figure out who you can afford to recruit in that regard, where we just pivoted and we did some things a little bit differently. But a lot of teams are having to deal with high numbers. Now, I don't know if a lot of teams have 10 like we did in terms of newcomers, but we tried to find kids that fit. And so the biggest difference that you ask is you're doing a lot of recruiting, especially international recruiting, you're doing off of uh, film work. Even with some of our transfers, it's still film work because you can't get out to see, those kids in any live action because Kayla Cooper, a kid that hasn't played, a ton, but you remember from when you did recruit her. All of those things are a little bit of you got to have a little luck. You better have a lot of faith. But we're fortunate enough that it is coming together. And it's a process. It's a process. But when you talk about how much work it is, there's no more off periods for coaches. This is a 12 month almost a 365 if we don't take some days off in there. But it's something that you have to manage. And as coaches, we're all moving into this baseball world of Moneyball, and it's a management type deal for us now.
I guess I can call you general manager, Kelly Bond White. A little bit.
GM, baby,
Yeah.
GM.
One of those returners that does come back though, Tierney Brown, being that she's a veteran. She's been around the block, and she's been in games that, the type of games that are going to be played on Monday, going on the road, some
Yeah.
Power Five schools. How important is she going to be, especially at the start of the season?
You know what? Tierney balances us. She gives us a sense of calm in that regard. And her IQ is there. She knows my system. She's been in it. There was some adversity last year through injury that she had to go through. And just like all of our kids, she had to make a big decision going into her last year. Is this something I want to do? Do I want to fight? Through my body, through some things. And she chose that. And we had an open and honest conversation. And I can't be more, well, yes, I can. I'm not gonna sit here. As coaches, we're never satisfied. But I'm pleased with the intentionality that she's had this year. She knows it's gonna be ups and downs. But we're trying to remain at neutral. We're trying to keep her at neutral where you know what? Do what you do best. And that's where she's earned the respect of her teammates in that regard. But going back to it, just having a returner that means so much more because she is Miss Saluki, she is Miss SIU. Um, she is what we embody when we're looking for a student athlete. And so for her, we know what she's capable of doing. She's knocking down that shot. She's opportunistic with her show shot to get into the paint to do some things. And so that's one of my grandmamas. That's what I call her. We got three of them. And she's one of my grandmas of the team that's helped leading us.
With a lot of these newcomers, even though they're new to the roster, they're not necessarily new to college basketball. You mentioned a few names already. But who of the newcomers has stood out in practice, and who do you think is going to kind of burst onto the scene on Monday?
Yeah, well, I think we've asked a lot out of Janiyah Thompson, who is a return to the SIU program after starting here her freshman year, tearing it up at John A. Logan down the road, and then graduating out of a Wichita State program. She's the young lady that chose to come home as a graduate student. That really stretches the floor for us, just like Tierney, my second grandmom, that brings some experience. We're playing her at all kind of a little bit of positionless basketball of where we need her to try to create some mismatches in areas, but she's shooting the heck out of the ball right now. But again, another kid that balances us. And then Gift. Gift is a young lady that has, traveled the world, from Nigeria. Just the physicality, is a little different. So she's adjusting in that. But what she is kind of a double machine, and we're hoping to get that out of her. But I know in this first test, the physicality of the game is something that I think our kids need. We need to see that. We need to see what that looks like because there are not many Auburns in our league. We play like them right now. And so I wanted that game because I want our kids to see this is where we're going on a consistent basis. And when we get to the Missouri Valley, nobody else is playing like that but us. So teams will have to prepare for us in that regard. So I'm excited for it. But another young lady that just jumps off the page is Alice Kerman. Alice coming in from Sweden. She's played U21. She's won a championship in the Swedish FIBA leagues. And she's a kid that just keeps getting better and better. And from that point guard, shooting guard position, we're asking a lot out of her. But she studies, she understands the game, and she's one that I think is going to become a quick fan favorite.
You mentioned that injury-related adversity. There was a lot of it last
Mm.
year, but even despite that, you guys brought some of the best teams in the Valley down to the wire. Thinking back to
Yeah.
the Drake game, thinking back to the Murray State game. I think those are great examples of creating that chaos, and that's much easier when you have the depth. How much more confidence
Yeah.
do you have in the depth this season?
I like the depth, but like I told our kids, depth is just a word right now until we go through the experiences of it. And for a coach to be able to use their bench, trust has to be established. And they do that every day in practice, or they weaken that every day in practice. So we're not as deep as I want to be right now, just because the learning curve is still so big. But as we get there, if they just play hard for me through their mistakes, we're bigger, we're longer. But you lose kids. When you lose a Kiera Love, you lose a kid that goes from a 3, 4 year starter that just created havoc. When you look at her, Mason, and Randall, those are three kids that were probably all in the top six in steals in our conference. Steals are possessions. Those are more possessions for us. And that's what kept us in games that you're referencing, that we took teams down the wire. So every year, what I'm looking for these groups to do is learn how to win at the end, and from coaches as well. If we get us close enough, then as coaches, we have to bring them over the hump. But even though this is a new group, we're not starting all over again, because the difference in this group is they have seen it now. They could watch last year's team. They could look at some of these returners and they get it, like, oh, that's why we're playing like that, because we're creating this to do this. And so it hasn't seemed like my first year where you're just starting all over. There is some foundation there, that we take note to, that every team in this conference is on notice, that we're coming.
No doubt. Now, offensively, there's some good size to the roster, but so many of these newcomers are the perimeter players, are those shooter types. What are
Yeah.
your expectations for the
Yeah.
offense this early?
Man, I got a lot of shooters. Now I need some makers. I gotta get some makers now. And that's the charge to them. We've implemented green light shooting with our kids, which is just something to protect them and to get them in the gym and understand who they are, what shot selection is, not questioning certain things, but understanding tempo and shot selection are huge. So we went out specifically to recruit kids that could stretch the floor. So whether teams are going to try to, pressure us, that create lanes for us to penetrate and kick, or if they try to sag and switch on us, we got some kids that can stretch that both from the forward position as well as the wing.
Now, with this matchup, Auburn, a conference and an opponent that you're obviously very familiar with, what's attractive to you about starting the season with a matchup against a team like Auburn that is Power Five, that is SEC, that plays in this great big arena? What about that
Yeah.
experience was attractive to you?
The biggest thing is they put their shorts on the same way we do. They tie up their shoes the same way we do. And so coming into an arena like that is, I wanted our kids to be tested. I wanted our kids to be hit early. I wanted a standard to be set where they recognize, oh, wow, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what it is, and this is where we're competing, because right out the gate, there's nobody that's going to push us, probably as hard until we do get to conference and we do see some other folk like that. But we have some other people on our schedule that are similar in play. But for our kids, we've piped in the music. Our guys team, they go just as hard, as Auburn is going to go. But like I said, our playbooks kind of mirror each other. We were together, for almost 12 years on the sideline together. So there's no surprises going to come out of either camp of what their playbook are. We're watching film and our kids are calling out plays, as we're watching them. So it's a familiarity, but it is people that have played on a higher level. They've gone through the gauntlet, but they got a new roster too. They got some kids that are new to that roster, and anytime you're meshing kids, it's going to be a process. So neither Auburn or ourselves will be who we want to be come March right now in November. So I like getting them in November.
I think one of my favorite parts, we'll end on this note, of our pregame conversations last year were some of the stories that you
Yeah.
would tell pregame, and you know some of the anecdotes they've used to prime up the team. Have you started
Yeah.
on what you're going to say Monday, or kind of have an outline in your head? Could you give us maybe a little preview?
You know what? It hasn't hit me yet. Um, we just finished midweek Bible study, so I will probably find something from that pulls me through. But I generally don't start to write that until 24 hours before the game, because I have a pulse of where my team is, what they need, what I believe they need to hear, what my coach's input is as we're going into that. So on the way to Auburn, I'm quite sure that something will trigger in my mind that I know. Let me go with this. So I'm really a move with the spirit type person. But I'll have something for you that I might be able to share as we get closer to our pregame.
100%. And of course, I'm sure we'll talk about it on Monday. Coach, really appreciate the time. I know it's a busy time and can't wait for Monday. Looking forward to it.
Hey, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm excited for these young ladies to have this opportunity. And I know we're going to compete.